I think the hardest thing about shooting it, and like any film, is getting the consistency all the way through, and then it's the decision of how you want the scene to look. Once you've made the decision of how you want something to look, then it's just a matter of mechanics, how you create that look.
It took me way too long to get around to watching The Man Who Wasn't There, but within the first 5 minutes I knew I had to make a video on it. The cinematography is so different yet so similar to what Deakins has done before. The black and white just leaves you in awe, and the shadows are something you can't ignore. In today's video I'll be looking at the equipment Deakins used, his use of lighting by looking at the lighting plans, as well as the overall look. This might be the simplest setup I've ever talked about on this channel, with Deakins opting for only the Arriflex 535B, pairing it with Cooke S4 lenses and Kodak's Vision 320T stock. And yes, it was a colour stock, but I'll get onto that later. The 535B was Deakins' preferred camera when shooting film, and what he calls the best film camera. It replaced Arri's Arriflex 35BL line in 1990 and since then has been the workhorse of the industry, even earning Arri an Academy Award for Scientific and Engineering in 1995. As for the use of S4s, these are the perfect lenses for when you want superb image quality, which Deakins strives for, but what I know them for is their colour, which isn't that useful here. Apart from the fact that it's a colour stock, it seems quite obvious why Deakins opted for 320T, as its shadows are absolutely incredible. You can look so deep into them, and all without losing the highlights. I mean, it seems like there wouldn't have been a better stock for the circumstances. What really stood out to me in this film, apart from the use of black and white, was the lighting. We are given a real sense of film noir, yet it feels almost soft in parts, and I mean that in a theoretical sense. Anyway, to start where the film starts, we need to look at the barbershop. Now, what Deakins does incredibly well is making a location look unlit, and without looking at lighting plans, it's hard to describe how he does it. Now, the only plan I could find was the one for the idea before what they actually did, but it's still interesting to see. They changed it because, as we can see on the lighting plan, the original lights were just outside the window, and not wanting to resort to scissor lifts, Deakins found a much easier option, and that was to hang a series of lights projected onto a bounce material attached to the roof of the building. In a bit more detail, he rigged a central pipe to hold the hanging lights, which would have been 1.2 HMIs in order to extend the wrap of the bounce light. For an example of the bounce, in this shot the bounce would have come from both the right and the left of the frame, and they would have been close to being seen in the window. Inside the building there would have been a bit of light bouncing off some soft muslin taped to the ceiling above the window. Now, the bank was an actual location with just one problem, and it was the windows looking out onto the street, which means that Deakins couldn't place his lights where he wanted to, as they would have ended up causing a car crash. However, he ended up placing lights in the parking lane to create just enough depth in order to cover the diffused windows. By looking at the lighting plan, we can see that he used 18Ks here, which are often used to replicate sunlight. He then used a Lee half diffusion on the windows, and in order to create the harsh shape on the floor that we can just see, he placed a light on the balcony and used mirrors, which is a technique he used quite often throughout the production. We can also see that he bounced some soft blondes inside, as well as adding a couple of practicals. As for the bingo hall, I don't really know what else I was expecting in regards to lighting. Now, this was one of the many scenes that was shot on location and not in a studio, so the lighting is rather simple. By looking at the lighting plan, we can see that Deakins placed a few 5K space lamps along the centre of the room, blacked out the windows, and then lit the preacher and the crucifix behind him with a couple of 1K Fresnel lamps. So, in Deakins' words, this was a very simple setup and one that was easy to rig. Finally, we have a Bunder's house, and this seems to be yet another scene shot on location. Now, Deakins tends to find night exteriors rather challenging, and this scene was no different. If we take a look at the lighting plan, we can see that he used quite a few lights. Starting off, we have the two 18Ks that shine on the house and the car, and if we take a closer look, we can see the note that adds a branch in front of the light, which creates this really nice shadow on the house. Following this is a couple of 6Ks, a few practicals, and an 18K shining down on the street. As for the close-ups, Deakins would add a soft light to wrap around the faces, but other than that, it's lit from afar. Now, the look of this film stands out amongst the Coens and Deakins filmographies, and to put it simply, it's because it's shot in black and white. So this film was probably written as a black and white film, and I only say probably because you can never know what's going on inside someone's head.
I think they wrote it as a black and white piece. In fact, I'm sure they did. It was no question it was going to be black and white, except when it came to the financing.
Anyway, before production, there was an issue with the financing, as I'm sure you know, black and white is a gamble, and studios really don't like taking that kind of risk. Anyway, they did this time. Interestingly though, it was shot on a colour negative, which according to Deakins was for contractual reasons, and I managed to find a few frames from the original colour negative, so I'll link the site I found it on down below. But why do you actually choose to shoot a film like this in black and white? Well, it can be for a multitude of reasons, and as I can't find a solid answer from either the Coens or Deakins, I'm just going to list a couple of my thoughts. Firstly, it's a crime drama set in the 40s, so why wouldn't you shoot it in black and white? Secondly, it looks really bloody good. The thing is, without knowing what they were thinking, there's not much I can say with confidence. Sure, it changes the feel of a film by providing an atmosphere that colour can't, and it creates a completely different thematic tone to colour, but I just can't bring myself to put my thoughts into the conversation when people like the Coens are involved. I can, however, look more into the specifics of the cinematography, one of those being silhouettes. Now, these are extremely prevalent throughout, from a scene in a bathroom to talking to a lawyer. Like black and white, we can interpret this in a number of ways, and in this it's used in a number of ways. For example, here it's used to define a character, whereas here it's used to create a sense of mystery. Now, it isn't really a surprise that there are silhouettes throughout, as Deakins has been using them since the start of his career, with them getting progressively more and more visually striking. As for the use of haze and smoke, it's again extremely prevalent, but in a high contrast film like this, it adds so much to the overall look of the film. It's subtle enough to not be distracting to an audience, yet it draws our attention to what Deakins wants us to look at. Negative space is something that I don't usually touch on, and I don't really know why. When used in restraint like it is in this, it's an incredible tool for visual storytelling. It simplifies the image down more than most other techniques can, and is yet another method for DPs to guide to the audience without it being distracting, which for Deakins is very important.
In a way, that's my failure, because you shouldn't really, nothing should specifically stand out. You're trying to put the audience in a world that they're immersed in, and everything should flow as a piece.
So overall, in order to create this mysterious yet breathtaking atmosphere, Deakins used broad yet defined lighting, maybe adding a few harsh shadows here and there. Silhouettes were bold and helped to define characters, and negative space helped guide us through scenes. I mean, it's simply one of the best looking films I've ever seen. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. You know what to do if you did. If you have a recommendation for an analysis, leave it down below. Thank you so much for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time. Bye.